If you've been paying even half attention to the news lately, you've seen or heard about NBC Today Show host Savannah Guthrie's mother's kidnapping. It's been everywhere. I didn't want to really go into that case, but I did find a case similar that shares some of the same characteristics. My name is M. William Phelps. I'm an investigative journalist and the New York Times best-selling author of dozens of true crime books. I've dedicated the past 25 years of my life to helping families of the missing and murdered. Join me. We're crossing the line. As a young beer drinker, back in the early 80s, I recall that a prized possession was a 6-pack of Coors beer. You couldn't buy it in New England or any other state close by. So whenever someone went out west or to Colorado, they'd bring back a case or two, and just the novelty alone, the fact that you couldn't get it here, made it taste all that much better than it actually did. That's what I think when I hear the name Coors. But let's go back to February 9th, 1960. In Morrison, Colorado, on a cold morning, a milkman is puttering along in his little odd-looking truck, heading toward a bridge over what was called Turkey Creek. He's going about his usual routine of delivering milk, a pastime that is actually making a comeback here in New England. Bottles of milk dropped off weekly at your door. I think the difference is that back then, 1960, you could actually drink the milk without your digestive system being sent into absolute chaos. Unlike today, where the entire world is lactose intolerant, and a tall glass of 100% whole milk, at least speaking for myself, would probably send me to the ER. But anyway, this milkman heading over the bridge comes up to the back of a vehicle stopped in the middle of the bridge. So he parks his vehicle and begins to toot his horn, growing increasingly frustrated that the person in front of him in the car will not move. And I'll say this, watch out for an irate milkman. After some time, the milkman gets out of his vehicle, probably pissed off, and walks up to the vehicle blocking his way. It's an international travelall, which is basically a station wagon built back then square and tough as a tank. The milkman gets to the vehicle and he realizes there's nobody inside. The car seems to have been abandoned there in the strangest spot in the center of the bridge. Adding to the oddness of the situation, the vehicle is still running and the radio is on. Looking around, the milkman notices a reddish stain near the vehicle on the bridge, which he reckons to be blood. He looks over the edge of the bridge and sees a man's fedora hat sitting on the riverbank's edge below. The milkman, of course, reports all of this to the local police. As police begin to go through the vehicle, they realize this isn't just anyone's station wagon, but Adolph Coors III's vehicle. Coors is the grandson of Adolph Coors and the heir to the Coors Brewing Company fortune and empire. Coors is 45 years old, married to Mary Grant, coming from old money herself, as they say, and they have 4 children. He is a Cornell University graduate and comes from a long line of very rich people. Incidentally, he is also 6 feet 2 inches tall, loved to play softball, and also drive cattle at his sprawling ranch. But his main gig is working as the CEO and chairman of the board of the Coors Brewing Company, which is headquartered in Golden, Colorado, about 9 miles or a 15-minute drive north of Morrison, where Coors' vehicle has now been found abandoned. One of 2 situations likely took place, police decide. Coors has chosen this spot to kill himself, which seems highly unlikely considering the bridge is not necessarily a place one would go to jump off of. It's not high enough. It's just not the place to do it. Or he's been kidnapped. Money, status. Let's grab the guy, make a quick buck. Police begin searching the immediate area. This is a small bridge, maybe the length of 3 cars, and wide enough, as we established earlier, for only one car to drive over at a time. The river below is more like a stream or creek, as it has been more aptly called. It's filthy and muddy, and the water is inches deep in most places and dried up in others. A well-known wealthy man, the idea that Coors is missing, presumed to be kidnapped or having taken his own life, brings out the law enforcement troops, which is something we have done in this country for, as this case proves, and the Lindbergh baby kidnapping in 1932, many years before it, for over a century. We place more value on someone if they have a social standing, if they are rich, a celebrity, or seem to be of importance, a word that I want to put in quotes, because we're all important. We saw this most recently with the Nancy Guthrie NBC Today show host Savannah Guthrie's mother's disappearance and presumed kidnapping. Endless resources are pumped into some missing person cases based solely on status, celebrity, or how much money the person makes, while other cases are literally looked at and forgotten about, not only by the public and media, but law enforcement. It's an American dynamic that stings whenever I see it take place. Look, I want Nancy Guthrie to come back and be reunited with her family. That's not what I mean here. I'm just pointing out the obvious. As they begin to scour the area where they located Coors' abandoned vehicle, they start finding evidence. First, that hat the milkman had reported seeing, then a pair of glasses, and, of course, they confirmed that the reddish stain on the bridge near the vehicle is definitely blood and likely Adolph Coors' blood on top of that. They come up with nothing more. After speaking with Coors' wife and the idea that her husband could have been kidnapped and a ransom will soon be coming in, they wait the required 24-hour period to invoke the federal kidnapping statute, which allows the feds to send in the cavalry from the Denver division of the FBI. It's a no stone unturned case now. The name, the social standing. The feds will inject everything they have into this case until there is a resolution. I mentioned the baby Lindbergh kidnapping case from 1932. Baby Chaz Lindbergh being the 20-month-old son of famed aviator Charles Lindbergh, who was kidnapped from the family home in New Jersey. In that case, the kidnappers demanded $50,000 in cash. The family paid the ransom, but the baby was never returned. Within 2 months, the FBI located the child's dead body. Another major media event kidnapping case was Patty Hearst, 19 at the time, in 1974, the granddaughter of publishing superpower Randolph Hearst. Patty was taken by the Symbionese Liberation Army, SLA, who demanded millions of dollars in food for the poor in exchange for her release. That case is a bit more complicated as it involved, some have said, Stockholm Syndrome, where Patty Hearst actually became part of the group who kidnapped her and infamously appeared in photographs holding a weapon during a bank robbery, a crime she was later convicted of and sent to prison. More contemporary cases include Elizabeth Smart, abducted from her bedroom in Salt Lake City and held in the woods and abused. The Smart case and the 1991 case of J.C. Dugard, 11 years old and kidnapped near her home in Lake Tahoe and held for 18 years and found in 2009, some have said, spotlight the importance of community awareness and how the media can help rescue efforts. I agree. Both community members and the media are vital in helping to find people who have been abducted. Why some of these cases are valued more by the media and community than others, well, I don't have to say it. It's implicit if you just look at all of the most high-profile cases together and focus on what you don't see. I'm convinced this will never change. There will never be broad or equal importance given to each case, no matter the person's looks, status, race, age, money, or any other factors. It is who we are. It is embedded into the American culture. In the Coors case from 1960, something significant happens the day after Coors' vehicle is found along the bridge. The FBI is at the local post office, searching through incoming mail, when they come across a letter addressed to Mary Coors with no return address and marked with the word personal in the lower left-hand corner of the envelope. Her husband's kidnappers apparently are opening up a channel of communication to see that Coors makes it back home alive, and most importantly to them, they get paid. I think I'm going to take our first break here. You are listening to Crossing the Line with M. William Phelps. I have a new narrative podcast out, which I partnered with Sony Music Entertainment for. It's called Fatal Fantasy and is available wherever you get your podcasts. Here's a sneak peek to take us out into the break. Every human being fantasizes, maybe imagines hitting the lotto, possibly finding that lover they've always dreamt of, or perhaps carrying out a diabolical murder in the most brutal way imaginable.
Dr. Schwartz was face down in a pool of blood.
A renowned scientist killed in a murderous frenzy.
A very gruesome and disturbing scene.
Persons of interest, obsessed with role-playing and the occult. And at the center of it all, a twisted leader called the Lord of Chaos, and a killer hiding behind a mask of sanity.
We're here now. I can smell blood.
From Sony Music Entertainment and M. William Phelps, LLC, this is Fatal Fantasy, coming March 1st to the binge. Listen wherever you get your podcasts. Be right back with more Crossing the Line in a moment. Typewritten on a piece of paper, which is a rather shocking way to describe communication today. The ransom letter Mrs. Coors receives and hands over to the FBI immediately begins with the obvious. Your husband has been kidnapped. Call the police or FBI, he dies. Cooperate, he lives. They want $200,000 in cash in $10 bills and another $300,000 in cash in $20 bills. There will be no negotiating. The letter then goes on to explain that they will know if she calls the police or records the serial numbers of the money. I don't know how they'd ever know that, but there you go. They demand the cash be in used, non-consecutive, unrecorded, and unmarked bills. Then they give instructions as to how to deliver the cash. Put it all in a bag with the letter and the envelope. Have 2 men and a car ready to make the delivery. When that is done, they demand that Mary Coors place an ad in the Denver Post for a tractor for sale and sign the ad King Ranch, Fort Lupton. Wait at NA 94455 for instructions after the ad appears. Deliver immediately after receiving call. Any delay will be regarded as a stall to set up a stakeout. Understand this, Adolf's life is in your hands. We have no desire to commit murder. All we want is that money. If you follow the instructions, he will be released unharmed within 48 hours after the money is received. And that's about all the letter says. On the same day the letter is discovered, Adolf Coors' father, Adolf II, gathers reporters together and announces that he has something to say. The story, from the media's perspective, is gaining steam. Big time. I am dealing with crooks who have something I want to buy, Mr. Coors, the second says. My son. He adds that whatever the cost is, it doesn't matter, suggesting he will pay any amount of money to get his son back. Studying this ransom letter, it's clear that it is not written by some sort of two-bit hoodlum who saw an opportunity and took it. The language and how well thought out the kidnapping had been, and also how they want to communicate and pay the ransom, feels like there was a lot of consideration and planning involved. A lot of thought went into this crime, and the FBI can clearly see this. While the FBI's behavioral and investigative teams analyze the letter for anything they can glean from its contents, the writing, or forensically, state and local police do the hard, gumshoe work of canvassing the area around where Coors was kidnapped. This is generally where you begin to develop the earliest information, which will later mean something. You knock on doors and you ask questions. You keep on people and ask those same questions over and over. Poke and prod people to come forward. Somebody had to see something on that day. It was light out. The bridge is a place many people travel over. There were people in the area. As they conduct interviews with locals, a canary yellow Mercury, a vehicle, keeps coming up with several people. This vehicle had been seen in the area on multiple occasions over a long period of time, and nobody around can claim ownership of a car even similar. So it appears that someone was scoping out or watching the area or hanging around looking for somebody. Kidnappers do not act in the moment. A kidnapping, especially one of this magnitude, requires planning on some level, and with this letter now in their possession, they know that the kidnapper or kidnappers thought through this crime to a large extent. So it makes sense now, this yellow Mercury vehicle out there driving around, being seen for months and months and months. Other information they get about this yellow Mercury is that the person driving the vehicle had a rifle in the front seat. So some witnesses had gotten close enough to the car to see this now important piece of the puzzle. Then someone recalls a plate number. From there, they come up with a name: Walter Osborne. Meanwhile, Mary Coors places a 3-line ad in the Denver Post as directed by the kidnapper. This ad runs on February 11th. It says exactly what it is supposed to say. John Deere 1957 model 820 69 HP tractor for sale, King Ranch, Fort Lupton, Colorado. Adolph's father, the man who gave reporters that headline about having to buy his son back, secures the cash as the letter instructed. He has the money delivered to Mary Coors for safekeeping and delivery so that when she is finally instructed to hand it over, she'll have it. And they wait. Days go by. No word. Then a week. Still no word or any indication that Adolph Coors is alive or will be returned to the family in exchange for the money. Mary Coors addresses the media, giving a direct scripted message to her husband's kidnapper. We are ready to pay for my husband's safe return. Now, in most of these cases, if nothing is heard from the kidnapper for weeks and the person is not returned, the hope of survival diminishes greatly. I think that's obvious. It tells investigators that something, maybe a contingency, has occurred on the kidnapper's end. Something happened they did not expect. For some reason, they have abandoned the entire crime, which certainly does not bode well for the survival of the victim. The FBI is working tirelessly by now trying to find this Walter Osborne dude. They run the name through the driver's license record department in Colorado. Luckily for them, they produce a fingerprint of Osborne, which happens to be on file. All of these cases require luck in some respects, a break they weren't expecting. This is it. They have a fingerprint of Osborne, the man with the rifle staking out that bridge. And they all know, that gut instinct is telling them, This is the dude who stalked Coors, learned his routines, and finally took an opportunity on that day to kidnap him. The blood on the bridge, however, is there, hovering in the back of the minds of law enforcement. That is not a good sign. After sending in that fingerprint, alarm bells ring and worry for the Coors family becomes utter dread as they all learn the identity of the man whose fingerprint is now connected to the Coors kidnapping. That fingerprint comes back not as a guy named Walter Osborne, but that of Joseph Corbett Jr., who does own a yellow Mercury, but is also an escaped convicted murderer from California, for whom law enforcement has been chasing since 1955, years ago. Corbett had crawled through a shower bathroom window inside the California Institution for Men, scaled one of the fences, and took off. He has not been seen since. Corbett had been transferred to the institution from San Quentin State Prison after he expressed an interest in conducting physics studies. He had been at San Quentin since being convicted of murder in 1951 for shooting to death and robbing an Air Force Sergeant, Alan Lee Reed. What's more, they find out where Corbett had been living in town after getting several tips and head out there to conduct a search, hoping, of course, to find Coors tied up in some room or in the basement being kept as a prisoner. It appears, for all they could gather on the guy, Corbett had been stalking Coors for 4 years, planning this thing meticulously down to every little detail. I would call that obsession, actually, not necessarily planning. And the fact that he had spent 4 years obsessing over Coors and, in his mind, plotting out this kidnapping, and he didn't take the money, well, that says a lot about the condition of Adolph Coors. At the apartment building where Corbett lived, they speak to a woman who tells them that this Walter Osborne, Joseph Corbett, moved out of the apartment back on February 10th, now several weeks ago, right after the Coors kidnapping. Next, they head inside to search his place. They do not find Coors, but they do find tent poles, leg irons, and handcuffs. Then they discover that Corbett had purchased a typewriter and a gun in the days before Coors was kidnapped. None of this looks good for bringing Adolph Coors back home alive. Let's take our final break here, come back and conclude this incredible kidnapping case. You are listening to Crossing the Line with M. William Phelps. The FBI found Corbett's Mercury, that canary yellow vehicle, on fire way back on the East Coast, in, of all places, Atlantic City, New Jersey, on February 17th. Joseph Corbett was then placed on the FBI's 10 most wanted list. They still do not have Coors back, however, and begin to wonder if they would ever see the man alive again, considering that Corbett had burned up his vehicle, forcing most involved to consider he was covering up evidence and didn't complete the kidnapping by getting the cash. They now begin working under the theory that he murdered Coors. When you look at Joseph Corbett, he resembles your average Joe Friday from the 60s. Think of any composite of the reputed Zodiac killer, and that is Corbett. Slicked back, brown hair, hazel eyes, fair complexion, with horned-rimmed glasses, and the overall look of the suburban 1950s and 60s dad next door. Discovering the identity of Coors' abductor did nothing to further the investigation into finding Coors or even Joseph Corbett. And for the remainder of that summer, the case grows as cold as a Colorado mountain peak in winter. Corbett was very good at covering his tracks. Hell, the man had been on the run after escaping from prison for almost 5 years. Authorities resigned that they would never catch him or find Adolph Coors. Any leads they had, dry up. All they can do is sit back and wait. And like a lot of these cases, when you least expect it, a break comes through. On September 11th, 1960, 7 months or so after Coors went missing, hikers passing through a wooded area 12 miles southwest of Sedalia, just south of Denver, find a pair of pants. And clipped to the pants is a key ring with the initials AC3, Adolph Coors III. After a search is conducted over the area, they find Adolph Coors' remaining clothes and, sadly, his skeletal remains. Corbett had murdered the guy. After an autopsy, it was determined that Coors had been shot in the back and shoulder. And they believe, after studying all of the evidence as a whole, that this wound happened on the bridge, when Coors likely tried to fight off Corbett or tried to run away. This is why he never went for the money. He probably shot the guy, tried to keep the guy alive, started to deal for the money. Still, where is Joseph Corbett? Why can't they find this guy? A little over a month later, way north in Canada, as the Coors story takes off in the media, a regular subscriber to Reader's Digest is reading an article about the story. After finishing the story, the reader calls into the RCMP, Royal Canadian Mounted Police. The reader says there was a man renting an apartment who looked an awful lot like Corbett, whose photo was in the Reader's Digest article. Then the manager of what they call a flop house in Winnipeg calls her local police and reports the same thing. Although the guy had recently left, she says he was driving a very distinctive fire engine red Pontiac. Then a co-worker of Corbett's comes forward to say he recognized him as well. By October 29, 1960, a Vancouver police officer is speaking to a local motel owner when a bystander hears them discussing a red Pontiac. He steps forward to say he knows a man with a similar car who is staying at the motel. Police and the FBI are called in. They knock on the door of the room where the man is said to be staying. According to an FBI report, the man opens the door, takes a look at all those big guns pointed at him, and he says, "I give up. I am the man you want." Joseph Corbett was finally in custody and heading back to Colorado to face murder charges. 23 FBI agents testify against the guy, burying him with evidence, including fingerprints and tying the typewriter they had found inside that yellow Mercury he burned to the kidnapper's letter. On March 19, 1961, Corbett is found guilty and sentenced to life. In prison, he proclaims his innocence. "I didn't do this. I didn't kidnap Coors. I didn't kill anybody." Sure you didn't. And by 1974, the laws in Colorado with regards to life sentences are changed, giving him a chance, if you can believe this, at parole. Routinely, Corbett applies for work release, an old habit he had learned from his time back in California. He is refused year after year. But then, December 1980, the parole board decides to cut the guy loose. Yes, Joseph Corbett walks out of prison, this, mind you, after escaping prison for one murder and committing another. Two-time murderer Joseph Corbett is a free man. Can you imagine a justice system rewarding a two-time murderer for good behavior in prison? By the FBI's definition itself, you could call him a serial killer. You don't have to imagine a justice system rewarding a two-time murderer for good behavior in prison, because that is the system we have here in the United States. Corbett spends the next 29 years living a crime-free life in seclusion, as far as anyone could tell, not wanting to be bothered by what he referred to as the nightmare of his life. And then he dies in August 2009. Can't make this shite up, as they say. That's it for this week. Be safe. Be aware. Sources for this episode include FBI.gov, a look back at the Coors kidnapping case, and accompanying documents and reports. Also, Anatomy of a Murder by Robert Sanchez, the 5280, February 2009, which is a great, very well-written, in-depth piece about this case. Crossing the Line is executive produced by M. William Phelps, LLC, and Matthew Valentinus, Mom's Basement Management. Written by me, M. William Phelps. Audio mastering and mixing by Matt Russell. Music by Epidemic Sound. Original music written and performed by Thomas Mooney, Tom Phelps, and Matt Russell.